This is why at the end of the day, your title doesn't matter. And today I normally do talk to my entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and personal branders, but this one applies across the board. Whether you are in a nonprofit, at a job, starting your own business, wherever you are in life, this particular subject applies across the board. Why your job title does not matter at the end of the day. At the end of the day, there are some instances where it makes a difference, but in most cases, nobody cares. And I'm going to explain why in 5 tips. So there's 5 points to this. Before I start my 5 points, I want to tell you a quick story. And that's about my own little job title experience. And, a couple years back, probably a little over 5 years back now, when I was starting to work for a manufacturer, and they happen to be global, they do titles differently. They had a more European flair for titles, a little nomenclature naming convention for titles. And I did not like that system. I really was embarrassed by my title. It kind of really got on my nerves. It was really actually annoying, but I took the job because I needed it, and it was in the area that I needed to move to at the time for a guy, to be honest. And so I was like, whatever, it's a title. It did perturb me a little bit. And I was like, gosh, I can't wait to get some kind of raise or something, or some promotion, so I don't have this god-awful title. The title was marketing coordinator. No, not marketing coordinator. That would be even more demeaning at this level. But it was marketing specialist, which I guess in European culture, they kind of regard that as like, ooh, you're a bit of an expert. But in US culture, who gets called a specialist? That's like the kids out of college, like, ooh, you're a specialist, you're special, trying to make them feel special because they're not making any money. And so, there's such an art to titles with HR and all that, but at the end of the day, again, I'm going to prove to you that this does not matter. And so, I had that little title, marketing specialist, it was whatever. Through that, I was on the job maybe like for 5 weeks, and got pulled into the VP's office, one of our VPs for the North American headquarters, who'd been working with me on a side project, and he just thought I was great for no reason. I can break down the reason. It's much longer than we have time for in this video. But for a small thing that I noticed that was in his face the whole time, he never saw it, because I'm coming in with fresh eyes. I could happen to see it and pointed it out, and he was just blown away that he'd never seen this before. And so that's what made him think of me when he had to get on this project for a merger and acquisition. He called me in the office after I'd only been on my new job as a marketing specialist for 5 weeks. And he says, hey, there's a role coming open in 5 minutes. I need you to apply for it. And I was like, what the heck? And it wasn't even related to anything I do. Again, it's another title that I didn't necessarily care about, albeit very different from the discipline I was in. So I was really like, okay, so now this doesn't necessarily fit my career path, and it's a whatever title, albeit better than a marketing specialist. This one was like project manager for a merger acquisition, a little bit better. I forget the actual title now. I made it up after the end of the day. We kind of really got to call ourselves what we wanted at that point. So what was so funny is I was like, what the world? Like we do project management as marketing. I was like, you do know my background is marketing. Like, are you certain you want me for this role? Like, why would you want me for this role? It was covering like 17 different work streams across the company: quality, EHS, sales, marketing, you name it. Aftermarket. This was for a manufacturer, and it was just across the board. Every department had representation for this team, and I was supposed to be a project manager for this team, really be a right hand to this guy who was largely had the ultimate responsibility for this project. And he pretty much said, A, I like your attitude. B, you are very detail oriented, and I like the fact that you caught something that I did not catch myself. As many times as I've been to this site and looked at this stuff, you caught something that I didn't, and I need someone like that to help me cover what I'm doing on this project. And he was like, if there's anything here that you don't know that, that you need to know for this role, I will teach you, no problem. But, your attitude, that's not something that you can create in someone. And, the attention to detail, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, fine, you believe I can do it? Fine. Who am I to argue with the VP of sales? So, or new build rather, it was new build at the time. So in any case, that's all to say that put me in a role, again, with another title, not necessarily one I super cared about, but I took it. The boss who hired me was a little bit quite perturbed. Let me not say a little bit. He was pissed off. He was PO'd to no end. He was like more pissed off than I ever seen a boss ever before at that time. And since then, I've seen another one more pissed off than that, believe that or not. But in any case, he eventually got over it, and we're good friends today. And what that role did was it put me, not only did I get to keep some level of marketing, communications, branding work in my role, because though I was project managing these 17 different work streams, there was no one to project manage the marketing, communications, branding aspect for this acquisition. Who was going to go in and change out all the signage for this site that they were acquiring, the signage, the clothing, the attire for the employees, the business cards, as little as that, the website, as big as that, the communications with the customers and the internal communications amongst the team and with other departments and all of these things. Ultimately, this was a publicly traded company, so there was a good amount of stakeholders to deal with outside of that. Plenty to work on. And so I got to lead that area as well. Again, not necessarily in my title. It doesn't matter. The work was there. And what else it did? It also put me in the stage in front of some global people that really mattered in my space. They were our global marketing teams, even our CEO. We had visibility in front of these people who were all headquartered in the UK and Scotland. And so it allowed us to have a lot of great interaction with those teams. It afforded several trips over there. And ultimately, it, long story short, ended up in me moving there for an entire year, covering as the company's global branding director. And that's a title that does matter. But, at the end of the day, it's the work that matters behind it. And so I say all that to say, had I cared about the titles, I would not have taken that role in the first place at that company at all. I would have looked at that role and been like, ugh, marketing specialist, who the heck gets called that? That's somebody who makes peanuts. That's what I would be thinking. And had I said no to it because of pride, ego, whatever, even though the salary met my basic requirements at the time, had I said no to it, I would not be where I am now. Ultimately, saying yes to a crappy title ended up giving me a great title by the end of the day, some global experience. I got to work with 70 different brand ambassadors in 17 different countries. In the merger acquisition stuff, it was with 17 different work streams. I worked with 195 million euro acquisitions before, which is absolutely amazing. Absolutely phenomenal. So who gets to do that, right? A marketing specialist, somebody who started out as a marketing specialist at a company for 5 weeks got to do that, okay? And that was not 10 years worth of a time span. I mean, we're talking with the inside of 2 years of a time frame, all that happened. Do not get hung up on titles. Do not get hung up on titles. Okay, so now to my 5 points, which will be so fast. Number 1, competence over confidence. There's plenty of people who have confidence for days, and confidence is good, but you must have the competence to back it up, because competence is what gets things done. Competence is what moves the needle. So I know plenty of people who care all day about the titles, and I would never call on them to work on any project because they're, excuse my language, they're just crap. Sincerely, like, I would never work with them because I have yet to see what good are you outside of being able to run your mouth. honestly. You know, so you can have confidence for days. That's wonderful. Maybe you should be in sales and maybe I might hire you for that. But nothing beats competence. So you need to be able to establish and prove your value. Competence wins all day over confidence. And I think people who get hung up on titles are often in that overly confident phase, or perhaps they actually are compensating for a lack of competence, you know? And so they need the title to give them a false sense of authority or a false sense of an ability to lead when they actually don't have it. I have seen a lot of that, and I know I'm not alone. I'm sure you've seen that. I guarantee you can think of a couple of examples if you think really hard back on your own stories in life. Point number 2 is something I thought was so poignant that my dad said. My dad is the pastor of a small church in Alabama. He's also a professor at Tuskegee. He teaches agriculture, forestry. He's actually an environmental rights activist, which I'm very proud of. He even met Cory Booker once, who's actually running for president right now, which is pretty awesome. Regardless of your politics, it's pretty cool that he took the time to come meet with my dad and talk with him about what he's doing for environmental civil rights in Alabama. When he was preaching one day, he mentioned in his sermon how his new boss at work, you know, so at Tuskegee, he's got a new boss. And he mentioned how this guy is just fire. You can tell by the way he talks about him that he really respects him. And I had never really heard him talk about a boss like this before. It was pretty intriguing to hear. And what he said was, when you see someone work so hard like that, it makes you want to work harder for them. So to me, that really said, my dad admires his boss because he's actually able to lead by example and not just with a title. You know, so I thought that was so critical and so important. I know we hear it so much that leadership is not title, leadership is not titles, leadership is action and by example, but truly to see it in real life is so much more rare. There are plenty of people who, you know, think because they have a title, it gives them the right to boss people around and give them some crazy little sense of authority that is unearned. So there's a lot to be said for someone who's willing to toe the line from the front, you know, and really put in heavy work. And I've seen that in my own efforts. I love working with teams, and I've had the great privilege to lead teams several times in my life, which have been awesome. And I can't think of a time where I didn't like the team that I was working with. They've all, you know, people are people and they all have their quirks, but at the end of the day, you know, it's the team together that makes things happen. It's the collective group mind that really helps to solve problems far better than you by yourself could. And so I think really good leaders know that, and they draw upon the strength of their team. I have said many times that I would not have had the success that I did if it were not for my team. On many projects, if it were not for the team that I was working with, we would not have accomplished, you know, anywhere near the lengths of accomplishment that we had for those projects if it weren't for that team. What I've noticed in those instances is when I super care about a project and I'm leading a team at that, I think that passion really shows through. I think people can tell when you really care about something, and also when you really have great passion to make sure it succeeds. We just had several events this year where I got to lead teams, and I think that's very true what my dad says. People can tell when you're putting in the hard work, and it makes them want to work hard too. So I've seen that effect in teams, and I think that's a great point to remember. Do not just lead with your mouth, lead by example with your actions. If you're putting in hard work, it does make other people want to work just as hard. Not everybody will always do it, but sincerely, it super spreads. It really does. Number 3, too much hierarchy kills innovation. So the more hierarchy you've got, all this red tape and titles and crap and approval levels to get through, it actually really does kill innovation. I have seen this myself. I have been witness to this myself, where you really had to go through this person and then that person. And by the way, check with 7 other people before you can make sure that this happens. And it is a bear. Like, sincerely, it is horrendous to have to deal with. And it's so much easier when you can kind of squash that hierarchy and work more horizontally in an organization, because then you can just really work with the talent and you find the people to get things done, and it happens without the red tape and without all the 7th, 8th people to get through. I think that's critical. Hierarchy can kill innovation in a project, and that, I'm serious, especially when you have deadlines and things to meet. Absolutely, you can do that. Number 4, people who are real leaders, i.e. they don't care about their titles. They don't mind getting their hands dirty. This a little bit alludes back to the hard work thing. But the thing about that is also, because they're willing to put in that hard work, they earn the right to make decisions. They earn the right to make those leadership level decisions. There is nothing worse than someone who just kind of strolls in and runs their mouth and thinks that, that they can get a team to do something when they've not earned an ounce of respect yet. And, they're just really trying to boss people around because they can, or they think they can. But I could tell you right now, that gets no results with anyone. So number 1, you have to earn that respect. And honestly, putting in the work and having that competence gets you respect. And especially the way you treat people, probably number 1, gets you respect. I remember one of my favorite things to do working on projects with teams is highlighting team members. So when someone actually did something genuinely praiseworthy, this is not just praise for the sake of praise, but someone did something genuinely praiseworthy, it is so great. There's nothing greater than to elevate them, highlight them, showcase them to the people that they know matters, that we all know matters, to a CEO, to someone higher up, to a client, to whomever. To give credit where credit's due is so powerful in a team. So also that can earn respect. And finally, number 5, another way to earn respect is that you as a leader are quite instrumental in helping to solve the hard problems. So you take it on. You're not passing the buck. You're not passing blame. You're not passing it off to someone else to handle all the time. You are taking responsibility and you're tackling it with your team to solve a difficult problem. That's leadership. And again, I'll say this is why titles at the end of the day don't matter. They don't matter because they do not speak to competence. They do not speak to your earned trust. They do not speak to your work ethic. And they do not speak to your success track record. Okay? They don't. And that's why they don't matter. And again, I'll remind you of that story of, when I had a crappy title before and it was what it was and it was like, you can't change it. However, I knew, this is what I know up here, and I'm going to bring what I know up here to my efforts now. And then let the chips fall where they may, it all falls out at the end of the day as to what your current level of skills, competence, and honestly, emotional skills, emotional intelligence leads you at the end of the day. So those are my 5 things. What do you think about titles? Do you agree that titles are not important? I will give you one quick example of when it is important. So I call myself Senior Marketing and Branding Director of the ADS agency. I'm the owner, but I don't like the term owner. I only use it with my bank. I don't like the term CEO because today 99% of small businesses are solopreneurs. So to hear someone call themselves CEO amongst a sea of CEOs of companies of one is ridiculous in my book. I mean, more power to you if that's what you call yourself. But in my world, I'm like, I can't do that. I have to be me. And it did bode well one time, because calling myself Senior Marketing and Branding Director makes it feel like the ADS agency is even bigger than it is now. Truth be told, we have plenty of partners we work with and vendors and all that to get our projects done. So I'm not all alone in the work that I do. But at the end of the day, it does make people think, that we're bigger than we are. I think it's important when you're starting out small, so you should play big. Joe Irwin from Irwin Penland said to do that. All right, so I'm done with that today. So again, I'm Andrea with the ADS Agency, as always, here to bring you the very best in marketing and branding tips, as well as business tips for those of you who are entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and personal branders. If you like this video, again, be sure to like the video and subscribe. If you are watching this here on YouTube, make sure you click subscribe and click the bell so you can get notifications when these videos come out. Otherwise, you will never see these videos again. It's just how this works. And if you're listening to this on podcast, be sure to subscribe to us wherever you're listening, Apple Podcast or Google Play or wherever you may be finding this podcast. Be sure to subscribe there so you keep seeing our podcast come out. And finally, be sure to follow us. This is where you can connect with us, ask questions, chat with us at The ADS Agency. That's THEADS, like ads, like advertising, agency. That's everywhere. Facebook, Pinterest, LinkedIn, and of course, Instagram and Twitter. So thanks so much for being here. We'll see you next time, and cheers. Mwah.